Currently a member of the American College of Nutrition and New York Academy of Sciences and medical director of a high complex medical lab. Dr. Flechas is an awesome lecturer and has many publications. Please welcome Dr. Flechas.
Testing, yeah. I don't have any financial interest in the company that makes the product that I'm talking about, but I want to start out with a story. My father was in the Air Force, and we used to live in a city called Wiesbaden in Germany along the Rhine River. And when I was there, I discovered that the Roman armies used to bivouac or used to spend their winters along the Rhine River, and they would spend their time at these little cities up and down the Rhine. And I looked into why were the Romans spending so much time along the Rhine, and it turns out that there was hot springs up and down that river. And I thought, now why would the Romans want to spend their winter, taking hot tub baths, or whatever? It turns out that they were actually drinking the water from the hot springs along the Rhine River. And in fact, some of the Roman soldiers would spend their time going from one hot spring to another drinking the water to figure out which hot spring water made you feel the best. And so they actually graded these hot springs for the way the water made you feel. The Russian nobility would come to winter out of Moscow, and they would come down to the Wiesbaden area. In fact, there's a whole group of Greek Orthodox churches along the Rhine River that from where the Russians used to come and spend their winters along there. And again, everybody was drinking the water out of these hot springs. When we eventually science would get caught up with this whole thing, and they tried to analyze the water from these hot springs to see what was so unique. And what they found is that the rivers or the springs that made you feel the best were the springs that had the highest content of silica in the water. And it had nothing to do with the other minerals. It had more to do with the amount of silica. And what happens is that the magma of the earth gets close to the surface, heats up the water. The water gets up to about 700 or 800 degrees steam. The steam is so hot that you can put a piece of wood in front of that steam and the wood will catch fire. But the hot steam would melt rock. And so it was an issue of the steam hitting these rocks and melting them, and then the rock would dissolve into the water, and there they would go. So we have since been fascinated over the years with silica and what is its significance for human health. Now, what's of interest is that the number one element on the earth is oxygen. Number two element is silicone. And the element silicone does not exist in nature in a pure form, but rather it's always combined with oxygen. Silicon dioxide, or otherwise known as silica, is formed by covalent bonding of two atoms of oxygen to one atom of silicone. Free silica is found both in its amorphous state, such as opal, and in the crystalline state, such as quartz. Biological systems are capable of forming amorphous microparticles of hydrated silica, but they cannot form the crystal forms of silica. The crystal forms would be what you would call quartz. This is the name of the chemical that's the hydrated form of silica is called opal. And opals have the ability to hang on to water. That's why for all of you who like to buy jewelry for your wives and so on, that when you got opal, you have to soak the stone every so many weeks or every so many months, because opal absorbs water and it can dehydrate. And this is a fire. It's called it's one of the opal stones that's available. But as you will see, opal is this. Here's another piece of opal. Here's another piece of opal. But all these are opal, and they all have the ability. They're a silica compound, and it has the ability to absorb water. Now, under proper conditions, one molecule of silica can react covalently with one molecule of water to form monometacilic acid. Combined with two molecules of water, and it becomes monoorthosilicic acid. In both plants and animals, monoorthosilicic acid is the biologically active form of silicone and silica. Now, as you will see here, in both animals and plants, this form of silica, otherwise known as opal, has the ability to, is the form of silica that the human body absorbs. And what we have discovered is that basically silica is this opal is the stuff that we are made from. This is our inheritance. Monoorthosilicic acid loses one molecule of water to form monometacilic acid, which polymerizes and participates out of solution to form opal. Plant tissues contain this form of opal with extremely small particle sizes. The loss of two molecules of water from silicic acid results in the formation of silicic anhydride, more commonly known as silica or silicon dioxide. The natural salicylates found in rocks correspond to these silicic acids, combined with transitional oxide metals and as salts of alkali metals. 60% of all the rocks are made of silica, either in its pure form or silicic mineral complexes. Erosion of these rocks releases into the soil, streams, and groundwater all these forms of silica and salicylates. Now, as you can see, here is a picture of a sand, and this sand that you see here in the desert is basically quartz, and it's been ground up and it's been turned into sand. However, inside that sand sits opal, and plants have the ability to selectively pull the opal out of the sand and use it for their structural strength and for other things to protect themselves. Plants do not use quartz as their primary mineral. The smaller the particle sizes, the greater the surface volume ratio and the greater the release of silicic acid. The Silica Cycle begins with the uptake of bioactive silica, that is monoorthosalicylate, by the roots and plants. And basically, you've seen in plants what are called the hairs on the roots of the plant. And the plants where these hairs are able to go out there and suck the opal out of the rocks. That's why when you put in an orchard, you take and put in some apple trees or some other trees, and at the base of the whole of the tree, you always put rocks. And rocks are basically nothing more than the minerals that the trees will use for putting into themselves and for putting into the fruit and so on. Can you name me one plant that does not have roots and is dependent upon other organisms to suck the minerals out of the rocks and so on? Mistletoe? What else? How about, orchids? How about blueberries? Blueberry roots, if you look at the roots of blueberries, you will not see hair or little hairs on the roots of blueberries. And that's because the blueberry is dependent upon a fungus found in the soil. Usually it's peat moss, and the peat moss will digest the minerals out of the rocks, and then the blueberry survives off of that. So a few years ago, probably about 20, 30 years ago, there was an episode where they took over 1 million blueberry plants to New Zealand, and they planted them without the peat moss. And what happened is that they lost all 1 million plants. Somebody had forgot to do their research on how blueberries survive. And it takes a special moss or a special fungus to grow in the soil to help feed the blueberry plants. And so the roots of the plants help to pull the silica out of the soil, and it helps to the plant for translocation, condensation, and precipitation inside the plant. Structurally, silica contributes compression, resistance, and rigidity to the cell walls, which aids in photosynthesis by improving light interception. It also renders the plant drought resistant. Now, it's interesting that in the field of homeopathy, they have always found men or humans who have problems with not having a good backbone, not being able to stand up for their rights or so on and so on. And in homeopathy, what they do is that they have found that if you give fluids that contain silica, that the silica helps to improve on a person's ability to fight back. Just like it gives you more rigidity to your backbone and so on. And so this is, in classical homeopathy, they've been using silica for that particular reason. And here you'll see it in the plant structures that helps with them. So you see a plant here, and if the plant were to become dehydrated, what happens to the plant? It just wilts, right? And if you put water into the soil, what happens? It springs right back up. And the rigidity of that plant is determined by the amount of silica, the amount of opal in the soil. Okay? Physiologically, the presence of silica reduces evaporation and transpiration, therefore conserving tissue water. It also promotes oxygen availability via the roots through the increasing rigidity of the air canals. Protectively, silica increases the resistance to pathogens, insects, and mollusks. It also protects the plants from toxicity of excess metals such as manganese and iron. And by distributing these oxides evenly into the plant tissues, increases their solubility. Silica acid also forms a silicate coating around the microparticles of the oxides of many metals, increasing their stability, preventing aggregation and precipitation. These microscopic amorphous particles of silica and the other silica-containing plant tissues return to the soil after recycling after the death and decay of the plants. So you'll notice in the old Jewish economy that they would plant a soil for like 6 years, and on the 7th year, what would they do? They would let it rest. And farmers have found that that was a good way to, even here in North America, you'll see many farmers who will allow their soil to rest for at least a whole year. One of the problems that I've seen is that down in California, the soils are so good that they harvest 3 or 4 different types of crops in 1 year off the same soil. And they just don't give their soils rest. And I think part of the issue of the resting of soil is the fact that the plants pull the opal out of the soil, but they're not, then the plant is destroyed and it's not returned back into the soil to recycle the silica. Although plants and animals can combine silicic acid into organic substances, it is most likely via the silicone oxygen carbon silanolates bonding through condensation with a silicone group with a hydroxyl group of an organic compound that was proposed by Dr. Schwartz. The silica carbon bond, that is true organic silicone, does not exist in the Earth's crust. It's only a man-made product. What product would you anticipate that would be? Silicone, like in breast implants. Those are artificially made, and it's not something that's natural. It's not something that's made by nature, and as a result, they've had complications from the silicone breast implants as far as the ability of the immune system to react against this material. Silicic acid in water is much more bioavailable and is either absorbed rapidly after a short transit time in the blood, it's excreted in the urine, or diffusely passed into extracellular fluid compartments. When you put silica into the bloodstream, it can just about move anywhere it wants to inside the blood. So it can go into the tissues, the blood. It's excreted through the kidney system, and the excretion equals almost the same as the glomerular filtration rate of the kidney. Plants assimilate silica from the soil more effectively than animals and retain silica. As a result, herbaceous animals excrete in their urine 20 to 30 times more silica than carnivorous animals. Hence, you would expect to see more silica in your vegetarians than you would in people who are heavy meat eaters. Researchers use a sodium monomethylsalicylate to supplement the diet of chicks and rats made deficient in a silicone low diet. The addition of one molecule of water to metasilicic acid generates silicic acid in the intestinal tract. Silicone in the form of bioactive silicates was found to be essential for normal growth, bone formation, and production of connective tissue in both chicks and rats. In young growing bones, the concentration of silicone were in the same ranges as the concentration of calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. So look at this very closely. I mean, look at the human babies. Our babies have the same issues in the sense that the amount of concentration of silicone and a developing fetus has the same concentration of silicone in the body as it does for calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. As the bones of a baby, as the bones of a rat, as the bones of a chick mature, the silicone is progressively replaced with calcium, suggesting that silicone plays a role in the formation of bone matrix prior to calcium deposition. It's very crucial that there be silicone there if you want to have good bone structures. The highest silicone concentrations generally occur in connective tissues. Organs with the highest amount of connective tissue have the highest concentration of silicone. When several tissues from rats were analyzed for the silicone content, notice which tissues had the highest concentration. The aorta, the trachea, the tendons were 4 to 5 times richer in silicone than liver, heart, and muscles. Now, it's interesting that if you look at that particular statement, when I was in South Africa a few years ago, we were looking at the issues of what is the proper diet for a lion, and what types of foods do lions like to eat the most. It's the organ tissues. Lions eat lots of organ tissue, and they leave the tendons, they leave the other organs, the aorta, trachea, and so on. The tissues that are highest in silicone are the ones that the lions leave for the hyenas to eat. But the lions love to eat the liver, the heart, and the muscle of animals that they capture. The skin is also found to contain high levels of silicone. Now, silicone has the ability to absorb huge amounts of water, and babies that are born, the skin of a baby is loaded with silicone. So that's why you hear that term, smooth as a baby's aorta. But basically, the baby's skin is a very water-dependent system. And that's why we have to hydrate. Once a baby is born, we have to hydrate them and keep them well hydrated. It's because their systems become very dehydrated very quickly because of the high silicone inside the skin of the baby. As you get older, the amount of silica inside the human body goes way down. So as the skin gets older and older and older, what happens is we've seen that the amount of silicone in the skin becomes less. What was interesting is that there were no changes observed with aging in silicone concentrations in the heart, the liver, and in the muscle. The high silicone content of connective tissue arises mainly from its presence as an integral component of the glucosamine glycans, their mucopolysaccharides, and their protein complexes. What they have found is that in order for connective tissue to work like it's supposed to, you need a lot of silicone. Enzymatic hydrolysis of the glycoaminoglycans did not release free silicic acid, but rather yielded products of smaller, lower molecular weight still containing silicone. Even disaccharides of chondroitin sulfate contain significant amounts of silicone in bound form. Silicone also increases the hexamine content of articular cartilage. Collagen is, which is present in connective tissue, is the most abundant of all proteins in the higher vertebrates, accounting for up to 1/3 of all the total body protein. Carlisle demonstrated that silica in its bioactive forms an important role in collagen synthesis. So here's the story. You have a cell here and a cell there, And in between these two cells, you have collagen. And collagen is also is where the body will retain its fluids, and the fluids travel through there. But the collagen is also, and this is research work that's now been done, collagen between cells, known as ground substance and so on, is the product where the body stores its energy. Okay? Now, having said that, what I'm saying to you is that collagen between cells, the human body is a battery. It's a capacitor. And you store energy inside the collagen between your cells. Mike just died. Well, we're back up again. So collagen is, the collagen between cells is where we store our energy and will determine how much energy you have. And we today have machines where we can actually measure the amount of energy inside this collagen. And so I have a patient who walks in and she says, let me backtrack just a second. If the amount of energy stored inside the, quote, capacitor, our body, if the amount of energy stored there is 800 picofarads per body, I have patients who will walk in and say the following: Dr. Flechas, I go shopping, and when I go shopping, I only last maybe 5 or 10 minutes when I'm shopping, and then I got to go back into my car, go back home, lay down, and I'm in bed the rest of the day. So you will see people like this, and when I do the bioenergy testing of these patients, I find out that their capacitance is at around 300. They will have levels of up to, normal is 800. I had another lady who came in who told me that she was extremely tired and she was exhausted all the time. And so we did the bioimpedance testing on her, and what we found is that she had a level of 900. And what do you think was wrong with her? She basically had the same story. I go shopping, I get exhausted, I go home, I have to lay down. And when we looked at her, it was because she was depressed. So depression can cause you to be extremely fatigued, but it wasn't because she didn't have enough capacitance. She could hold energy, she just didn't have the mental energy to be able to do what she did. I had another lady who came in, and I asked her about what her day was like, and she said, well, I get up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, I start breakfast, I have the family up by 6:20, by 6:30, everybody's dressed, we sit down and have breakfast. She said, I start working on the dishes by 7, have everybody dressed and out to school and off to work by 7:45, 7:50. She said at 8:30, I'm a cosmetologist. I start working on someone's hair. She said, I work all day long. My mother picks up the kids at 3 o'clock. I'm home at 4:30. I make supper for the family. We eat at 6 o'clock. She said, we're finished by 6:30, and at 6:45, got my husband settled in front of the TV to watch the evening news she said, well, I go off to the gym and I work out for 45 minutes. Okay? And then she comes back home and she gets back home at about 9 o'clock and she basically makes sure that the kids have done their homework, they're taking their showers, and she looks at her husband at about 9:40 and she says, I'm taking my shower. And she said, your services will be required from 10 o'clock till 11 o'clock. I expect you there. No more TV after 10. So then they have a heavy lovemaking session from 10 to 11, and she's off to sleep by 11:10. And her husband was sitting there, and I said, "Is this lady for real?" He said, "Doc," he said, "that is 100% of her day." And he said, her mother's like that. Her 2 daughters are like that. They all the women in that family all behave the same way. They all do the same thing. I said, huh?
Good argument for cloning.
That's right. So I did the bioimpedance testing on this woman because I said, how many picofarads is this lady storing up inside that battery, you know? And normal is 800. She was at 3,000. Okay? Huh? She was having problems with fibrocystic breast disease and had problems with lack of iodine. And so she was an iodine deficiency person. But, you know, it was one of these things where this woman was, you know, she was, you know, a woman who was just absolutely phenomenal. And I've only run into about 2 or 3 of them since then. But we can measure the amount of energy stored inside that body. And when they have lots of that energy, they're biodynamic, okay? These ladies are incredible. So are their children, so are their, you know, and it says something about the diet. This lady loved to eat vegetables. If she had to have a snack, it was on vegetables and other things. And she only ate meat maybe once or twice a week, and so on, okay? But it basically taught me that there is something to be said about energy and how we store our energy. And part of the issue of being able to store that energy is this collagen material that's made from silica, okay? So collagen contains 12% of the amino acid proline and 9% of the 4-hydroxyproline. Silica increases synthesis of proline from glutamic acid and the presence of iron. Now, this is how you make collagen, folks. In the presence of taking iron, vitamin C, and silica, it enhances markedly the hydroxylation of proline residues of procollagen to form collagen. What tissues are collagen? What did I just describe for you as far as a collagen tissue? Hair, skin, nails, okay? So, and where do you get the proline from? You get proline from protein. So there are tissues that have preferred, who have preferred nutrients. The fuel of preference for the brain tissue is glucose, which is why when your blood sugars go real low, you start getting a little bit, you know, woozy. The fuel of preference for the heart is what? Fat. The heart burns fat as its primary fuel. The fuel of preference for the GI tract from the mouth all the way down to the other end is glutamine, and the fuel of choice for the hair, the skin, and so on is protein. That could be the protein of tofu, the protein of meat, the protein of the egg white. It needs protein, and when you're protein deficient, the hair starts becoming defective, the skin starts becoming defective, etc. But in the presence of silica plus these proteins with vitamin C and iron, you start making great amount of hair and nails and other tissues. Silica also promotes the formation of extracellular matrix, otherwise known as ground substance, with a concomitant increase in interstitial fluid due to the hydration of the extracellular substances. In balance studies, they took a bunch of men and they gave them a high fiber diet, low fiber diet, and what they found is that fiber contains a lot of silica, and what they found is that the amount of silica going in was the same amount of silica going out, and they found that the body doesn't retain too much silica from the vegetables. It is likely that food fiber does not contribute significantly to the bioavailable pool of silicic acid in the intestinal tract and may even interfere with the absorption of free silicic acid. So if you're not getting the silica from your food, where do you think you're getting it from? Where would you get your silica from if you can't get it from your vegetables and fruit? Your water. That's where the Roman armies found their silica, is that they were drinking water that was loaded with silica. Okay? But what are we doing to our water, folks? We're purifying it. We're getting rid of all the minerals. We're getting rid of everything there. And what are we generating for water? It's pure water with nothing in there. There's no silica, no silica that's inside that water. And this is one of the dangers that I see in our society, is the fact that we have water that has no silica. Nature loads silica into the streams. Nature loads silica into the springs that come out of the earth from hot geysers and so on and so on. That silica that's in there is what we, will thrive on. And by drinking the water like we do, and through the filtering systems of the cities and so on, we've actually taken out all the silica. And what do you think is happening? We're developing collagen tissues that are defective because we don't have enough silica. Does that make sense? Silicone levels in biological fluids over a wide range of intakes, serum silicone levels are maintained within a narrow range because of a very efficient renal clearance system. Renal clearance of silicone is similar to that of the glomerular filtration rate, with the implication that the silicone as silicic acid is passively cleared by the kidney and is dependent upon the GFR. In patients who have low GFR, the serum salicylate levels increase in proportion with a decrease in renal impairment. As we mentioned before, silica can go just about anywhere it wants to inside the body by passive diffusion. They've looked at silicone levels in different tissues, especially in the blood. And what they found is, look at the last point here, postmenopausal women were found to have lower levels of serum silicic acid compared to the premenopausal women. This is probably where we need to interact now the most. An association between silicone deficiency and Alzheimer's disease was proposed by Dr. Carlisle at UCLA back in 1987. 5% of the population over age 70 suffers from AD. Another important fact is that AD is twice as common in women as it is in men. An attempt to reproduce in old rats the neurotoxicity of aluminum observed in Alzheimer's and to evaluate the protective effects of silicone. Dr. Carlisle studied the effects of silicone and aluminum supplementation in the diets of female rats on silicone and aluminum in 12 different brain regions. The 2 ages of female rats were studied, 22-day-old weanling rats and 10-month-old rats. And Dr. Carlisle called them retired female breeders, and we'll call them just young and old female rats. Groups of rats were assigned to 4 dietary regimens: low silicone diet, silicone supplementation using sodium metasilicic acid at 600 parts per million, a low silicone diet plus aluminum, and then silicone supplementation plus aluminum. Then what they did is they measured 12 different regions of the brain, and there was no significant difference between the aluminum levels of the 12 regions in the brain in the low silicone diet of the young and old rats. On the low silicone diet, aluminum supplementation showed no effect on brain aluminum levels in the young rats. However, increased brain aluminum levels significantly in the hippocampus and posterior cortex of the old rats. Now, what's significant about the hippocampus, folks? Hippocampus sits just in front of your ears and deep and about an inch inside. What is there that's so important? The hippocampus. Every day you're generating memories. You're putting this information into your short-term memory, and then when you go to sleep, the short-term memories that you're developing right now will be incorporated into long-term memory, and those memories are stored inside the hippocampus. Okay? Now the hippocampus is where you store your long-term memory. And a little bit deeper inside is an area called the amygdala. And in the amygdala is where you store social memory, and you store memory that is associated with emotions. Now, men trend to put more information into the hippocampus because of their testosterone, whereas women trend to put more information into the amygdala. Guys, this is where your wife will sit there and say, honey, you did such and such an event 2 weeks ago, and you said something that really hurt me. And every time I think about it, all those emotions just come right back out, and I can just think about what you said, and it makes me mad. Yes, and so basically, that's the amygdala. And the amygdala is where women store their memories, but it's memory plus emotion. Right, ladies? Yeah? So all your husband or child has to do is do something, and it's stored as a memory, but every time that memory kicks up, the emotions that came with that memory come right up also. And so these memories are being controlled, and people with Alzheimer's lose that type of memory. They also lose their long-term memory. They also lose the ability to stimulate the amygdala, and as a result, they lose their memory plus emotional memory. And men have trouble in that area. So, like a woman will come and say, you made that statement to me 2 weeks ago, and it made me mad. And every time I think about that statement, I just get all angry about it again. And the guy looks at his wife and he says, I talked to you 2 weeks ago? And the woman says, yes, not only that, but you said the following statement, and I can give it to you verbatim, and that's all part of the hippocampus versus the amygdala. The hippocampus, long-term memory, rote memory. That's what happened to you when you were going through dental school. you had all this memory that was, you were given pages and pages of stuff to memorize. You were putting all that information into the amygdala. No emotion, into the hippocampus. No emotion attached to that. But give you emotional events that happened during dental school, and you'll not only remember the dental school, but you'll also remember the emotions that you were going through and the turmoil of the things that happened to you when you were going through dental school. Aluminum supplementation has no effect had no effect on brain aluminum levels, and silicone supplemented old rats, suggesting a protective role of biologically active silicates in adequate amounts against aluminum neurotoxicity in old age. And what they found was that the aluminum would not become toxic in older patients or older rats when there was plenty of silica in the system. The silica helped to protect the body from the effects of aluminum as the brain was getting older. And later on we found that that silicone, the opal silica, has the ability to suck the aluminum out of the human brain. Now, the other thing that's unique here is that women on estrogen. So, many of you women will notice that as you go through menopause, you've lost some memory. It happened to my mother. My mother went through menopause, and my sister took her out shopping. They went and bought some shoes from my sister. 3 days later, my sister says, Mom, we need to go back to the store that we bought these shoes from because they're a little bit too tight and I want to return them. And my mother says, this is a woman who at age 50 was undergoing menopause. And my mom looked at her and said, we went shopping 3 days ago? Where did we go? What store were we at? And so on and so on. And, this is as her estrogen levels were dropping, we started seeing this particular pattern of thinking developing inside my mom. By the time she was 60, she was fully senile. So, so that it basically just showed us that we started seeing the defects kicking in at age 50, and by the time she was 60, with no estrogen, and she was fearful to take estrogen because it might give her breast cancer. Well, it might have given her breast cancer. The problem is that she lost her mind in the process, okay? So estrogen, the lack of estrogen allows for aluminum to accumulate inside the brain. And what's interesting is that estrogen inhibits the ability of the brain to accumulate aluminum. And so we have seen that women who take estrogen into beyond the menopausal years, even if it's a small amount of estrogen, that estrogen is very protective for older women to keep them from developing problems with loss of memory and dementia. And so you'll see here in the last statement, in both rats and animals and humans, the brain becomes more permeable to aluminum with aging. In both old rats and men, the highest concentrations of aluminum were found in the hippocampus, where you store your long-term memory. You may say, where do I get aluminum from? Where do you get your aluminum from?
Table salt.
Huh?
Table salt.
Table salt?
Pots and pans.
The what?
Pots and pans.
Pots and pans.
Porcelain crowns.
In fact, porcelain crowns. In fact, it turns out that at the turn of the century, 100 years ago, we were all cooking off of iron skillets, right? And we hardly ever saw iron deficiency anemia because we were absorbing the iron out of our iron skillets and iron pots and so on. But when we got rid of those iron pots and pans, what did we start cooking with? Aluminum pots and pans. and that aluminum started accumulating in us, and now, 100 years later, you're seeing the results of all that aluminum cookery, okay? So it's been good that we've switched over to stainless steel and other types of cookware to get rid of the aluminum and so on. But you know, where is the population getting their aluminum from today? Huh? That's it. It's the antiperspirants, you know, because when you take and you put that antiperspirant on there, what's the first ingredient? Aluminum. Do you think that stuff is not absorbed? You know, there are a few things in American culture that we don't talk about. It's like we don't talk about certain things about our family. Well, there are certain things in America that we don't talk about. Number one is the fact that the United States of America is the #1 arms dealer in the world. If the Russians try to sell a submarine to somebody, shame, 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 it should have been us selling that submarine to somebody, okay? The Russians shouldn't sell this type of airplane to these type of people because we should have been the ones selling that airplane. You see that with what happened in Iraq with all the weapons that Saddam Hussein had. Where did he get his weapons from? Americans. The #2 product that we never talk about up front and in public is our personal accessories. Things like the underarm deodorants, the toothpaste, you know, which is, you know, so basically you guys are going against the grain by talking bad about aluminum, you know, about toothpaste that contains fluoride, right? And in this case, it's the aluminum found in antiperspirants. So what's the answer to that problem? You go around sweating, but at least you should smell good when you sweat. So they now have antiperspirants or deodorants that contain natural essential oils in the product. You smell good, you sweat, but you know it's better to be able to sweat than not sweat at all and end up with all these toxins inside of you. Does that make sense? You know, and I mean, we do surgery on breast cancer, and we look at the breast tissue for women who have been using antiperspirants, and we find that the breast tissue is loaded with lots and lots of aluminum. And it's from all the antiperspirants that women have been using over the years. So we still, you know, you would think that the aluminum stays on the outside. No, it's getting absorbed. And it's getting absorbed into the breast tissue. And from the breast tissue, it goes to the brain, and then the problems, therefore. I want to go on here just a little bit. This is probably the most significant work right here. Higher levels of silicone occur in the organs with the highest amount of connective tissue, such as the aorta, trachea, skin, tendons, and bones. That silicone deficiency is manifested by abnormalities involving articular tissue, cartilage, and connective tissue, has potential clinical applications and in arthritic conditions. They have looked at the skin, and they have found that as all of us are aging, our skin has less and less silicone in it, and as a result, then the skin wrinkles and the skin becomes dehydrated, and we're constantly trying to hydrate that skin as we get older. This is probably the greatest statement right here. Of greater clinical implication, however, is the loss of silicone in the aorta with aging. In 19 cases with a normal aorta, that is no arthrosclerosis present, the silicone content was 180 plus or minus 21 microgram of silicone per 100 milligrams of nitrogen. In 28 cases, and these are in human aortas, in 28 cases with moderate aortic damage, 1 or 2 plaques, look at the silicone content. It was 105 plus or minus 12. In 22 cases where there was serious aortic damage, that is, large number of atherosclerotic plaques, look at the silicone content. 63 plus or minus 8 microgram of silicone per 100 nitrogen. The sicker the aorta with less and less silicone, the aorta has more and more atherosclerosis present. Okay? Did you catch that? And the reason I say that is that I'm 62 years old. You would expect my aorta by this age to have at least maybe a third of the aorta covered with atherosclerosis, okay? Live an exciting, stressful life, et cetera, et cetera. And yet on a CT scan that was done about 2 years ago, because I had some belly pain, we looked at the aorta. The aorta was totally 100% clean. I've been taking silica now since about age 45, and I have zilch atherosclerosis inside my body.
So the formation of plaques is a solution to a problem.
That's correct. And the formation of plaque is a solution to a problem of a lack of enough silicone in the blood vessel. You know that silicone makes things pliable, and it doesn't make them rigid. And in my particular aorta, it is like that, and I have seen that over and over and over again in my particular patients at the office. The fact that the silicone inhibits the development of atherosclerosis. However, can we prove that from the animal studies? Look at this. 3 groups of rabbits followed for 2 months were studied for atheromatous lesions in the aorta. In the controlled group of 15 rabbits, 14 had no lesions, 1 rabbit had 2 atheromatous plaques. And 18 rabbits fed a high cholesterol diet for 2 months. Only 2 were without lesions. Of the 16 with lesions, 8 were moderate and 8 had severe atherosclerosis. Now, what we're talking about here is the rabbit is a animal model where we can give these animals, by giving them a high cholesterol dietary, and we're talking in human terms, we took these rabbits and we gave them a cholesterol level like we would see in humans of 1,400 milligrams. Okay? That's pretty high cholesterol. But in these rabbits, they had to do it in a small amount of time, and these rabbits just went right after it, and they formed atherosclerosis. In a third group of 18 rabbits, fed a high cholesterol diet for 2 months, but with supplementation of silicone IV. 14 rabbits had normal aortas without any lesions. 3 presented with 1 or 2 lesions, and 1 had severe plaques. So it basically shows us again that not only my observations about what was, about myself, and my patients, but the fact that when you try to do these studies in rabbits, you find that the silicone was able to prevent the development of atherosclerosis. Dr. Carlisle kept several generations of rats on a low silicone diet, and she noticed an increased incidence of tumors overall that were higher in the rabbits that was highest in the rabbits that were not getting any silica. And in longitudinal studies over a 2-year time period, she noticed that the rats had an increased incidence of brain tumors. And what we're talking about here is that you have a family, in human terms, you have a family that loves to eat meat. I got patients who have to have meat at least 2 or 3 times a day. and they eat so much meat that, until the second and third generation of children, that in Dr. Carlisle's case, she saw an increase in brain tumors starting to happen in these animals. And that's what we're talking about is that she kept these animals on a very low silica dietary. I got patients who just refuse to have vegetables. I got patients who refuse to eat any fruit. And they're doing this to themselves, their children, the next generation, and what you will see is an increased incidence of brain tumors as the generations go by, as we decrease the total amount of silica in the dietary of all these. Dr. Carlisle postulated regarding an essential role of silica in brain function is valid, and if silicon deficiency is in the form of bioactive silicates is involved in ADD and atherosclerosis and arthritis, a good starting point would be is to titrate the amount of bioavailable and bioactive silicates required to reverse these pathologies. Now, you'll notice that Dr. Carlisle saw this with patients who had attention deficit disorder. The guy who wrote the paper, some of you picked up the paper out there. You will get the paper about silica and human health through your email and so on. But what's interesting is that the fellow who developed this whole concept and wrote this paper from which I quoted is Dr. Abraham. Dr. Abraham developed a product called Cogimax. And Cogimax, he had a patient who had a problem with attention deficit disorder, and it turns out that silica, opal silica, is a tremendous stimulator to the human brain. And he had a child that had a problem with making D's and F's in school. He put the child on silica, and within a period of a month or two, the kid was making straight A's. This silica, this opal-type silica, behaves like a mild amphetamine to the human brain. It activates all centers of the human brain everywhere. That kid, numero uno child that was placed on the silica, just graduated from medical school about 3 years ago, and he was number one in his class. And he went from making D's and F's in high school to making straight A's in college, straight A's in medical school, and today he's out there among you practicing medicine. Okay? So, and I have personally done the exact same thing. I've given it to many a child with attention deficit disorder, and this product does work. So that the theory that I just gave you about silica and its effects upon the human brain are also valid for what we've seen in humans. So it's an issue of what to do with that information. And I can just tell you that this is an over-the-counter product. This is pharmaceutical grade opal, and we need to do more research as far as what effects opal will have in the future upon us. But we have been so used to thinking of silica in the form of quartz that we forget there are other silicas out there, and the silica of choice for plants, for animals, and for humans is the opal, microscopic opal. And the plants pick up that opal and they present it to us as part of their bodies so that we can eat these plants. And as you do so, you're getting the opal. But my main concern is how we are subtracting the silica out of our water systems. By doing what we're doing with the distilled waters that you have there in front of you, and the fact that we're not getting these waters from streams or from hot springs that contain dissolved silica inside the water. Does that make sense? I mean, the Roman soldiers of old were going around measuring, actually they were finding out which hot springs along the Rhine River made them feel good. And today we have gone back to all those springs because we have the records. And now we know that it was the springs along the Rhine River that contained the highest amount of silica. Any questions? Yes? It's about 50 milligram, and you need about 150 milligram. In fact, one of my dental friends, I gave him these are 3X pills, and he took 3 pills all at one time, and he came back at the end of that day and he said, I just wanted to let you know, he said, I took 3 of your little Cogimax pills, and he said, I felt like I drank 10 cups of water for breakfast. 10 cups of coffee for breakfast. He said, I have been so mentally alert, just full of energy, no tachycardia, no nervousness, and yet I have been very, very mentally alert. Okay? Now, where can you get this? There's a company out of Southern California, and it's the same company that makes iodoral, the iodine pills. It's the same company, and the product is called Cogimax, Cognition Enhancer. Yes?
When you say silica, you mean silicon dioxide?
You missed it. It's opal.
Oh, what is the chemical formula for that?
You have to look it up.
Is it 50 milligrams per day?
150 milligram per day. Again, there is no such thing as too much because it's filtered out immediately through the kidney, but it also accumulates within the tissues if there's a need for it. What we did find is that when we gave this particular product, the energy levels of the body went up, especially in the ground substance where the body is storing its energy. So this provides the battery juice that the body can use. It's
If we
time
could
to
just
stop, and it's time to let her go.
So I was just going to say, if we could just leave the questions till the speaker is
it's time
formed.
for the next
Thank you.
speaker. Okay?